So, I've just finished publishing a book about enlightenment and the salvation and rebirth of the soul. I've provided a link in the description. Now, I want to confess that there's a bit of a duality in my own soul about how I feel about this, um, because my old self, the self that I created for myself, is it's a little nervous to speak so openly about such extraordinarily powerful and important topics. When I've been doing most of my spiritual work very quietly up until now. I've genuinely worked a lot more with angels and with God than I have with people for quite some time. So stepping forth to be a little more open with the world about my path with God feels like a very dramatic and somewhat concerning transition. However, my higher spirit, the spirit which God has prepared for me, isn't nearly as nervous, and that's one of the most significant divides between my higher self and my lower self right now. My lower self is kind of like, hey God, we kind of had a pretty cool thing going there where I was like, the invisible quantum shadow counselor to, a handful of magical people and angels, and, we just kind of conspired about how to save everybody, and nobody had to really know who I was. That was kind of nice. I'm gonna miss that a little bit. Um, but my higher self is a little more like, there's really very little need or benefit to being nervous about just sharing love and wisdom with those who are in pursuit of ascension and redemption. That's why I prayed for wisdom, like Solomon. That's why I set out to discover the true nature of things in the first place. I can handle whatever comes my way because of this, because God, the one true God, is with me. So, let's help some people heal. Let's help some people grow. Let's wait for this car to go by. Let's reveal that the salvation of the soul through Christ truly is the next evolution of human consciousness. That anything that we can manifest for ourselves that is not our salvation is less than that. Now, if you choose to read what I've written, you might be inclined to side with my lower self a little bit. Like, yeah, this is definitely the sort of thing that you should be a little nervous about displaying publicly. Somebody's gonna try to kill you. I don't know. So be it. I shall ascend to Valhalla with the flames of 1,000 dragons burning in my heart. um, but ultimately, if I want to be a little more fully clothed in the spirit that God has prepared for me, then that's something I need to work on. I don't need to be as nervous about that sort of thing, about being able to just share healing wisdom in a comfortable and relatable way, without letting my worries hinder my productive communication. So I'm discussing this, I'm confessing this to you, because I want to convey it as an idea of some of the nuance that you yourself may experience in the process of working to transform the spirit that you created with yourself, for yourself, into the higher spirit that God has prepared for you. It isn't always just like, well, let's just stop being bad and be good now. That's obviously a significant part of our spiritual evolution, but there are often many other sorts of subtle nuances within our natures which which may not be terribly negative, but which might still hold us back if we don't acknowledge that they may be of a somewhat lower nature than the higher nature or the general spiritual self-improvement that we're aspiring towards. Um, though I can't know exactly what sorts of divides you will face as you work to aspire to higher consciousness, I would like to provide a few more direct examples from my own path. One of the big ones is that my lower self, the spirit which I created for myself, has a pretty significant impulse to crack jokes when they come into my head. And there's nothing wrong with a good joke in the right time and place. But as I've grown in wisdom, as I've spiritually evolved, I've come to more clearly see how disruptive humor can be in certain situations where it's ideal to maintain more mature spiritual energy. And that might be a little bit obvious, but I want to admit that there have been many times where I saw an opportunity for a good joke, and I just thought that I could just throw it out there and just shift right back to whatever the other energy was that was going on without breaking stride. And I kind of see that that was foolish and harmful to certain situations at times. I know better, and I hold myself to a higher standard now. So if I think of funny things, I resist the temptation to just blurt them out, and I'm a little more mindful of who I'm with and what the situation is, and if the humor is going to be appropriate and beneficial. So I choose to mention this one in particular because I think it's going to be rather relatable to men in particular, because half of us were just a bunch of screeching clowns when we were teenagers. So it's like a very natural and kind of normal evolution for us to have to come to a higher form of wisdom about how we share our humor with others as we mature. So another divide that I wish to explore between my higher and lower selves, my higher and lower natures, is how I used to deal with conflict. When people acted petty towards me or betrayed me. When I was young, I found it very easy to just sever ties with people when we had misunderstandings or when I felt that they were wasting my time. But as I've matured, as I've worked to step into the spirit which God has prepared for me, to be more genuinely empathic and compassionate towards others, even if they may be wrong, I've come to more fully understand just how immature that sort of behavior really was. There were many, many more intelligent and compassionate ways that I could have communicated with certain people at certain times and able to either seek to reconcile disagreements or, to establish my boundaries more clearly so that they might at least fully grasp why I wasn't accepting their behavior. Um, things which I really hadn't considered at the time. And I still have to be a little bit mindful of that sometimes. If I want to be more graceful and wise, I have to acknowledge that that old comfort zone might pop up sometimes if I see somebody being immature, and I shouldn't fall into similar immaturity. I shouldn't just cut people off, without making some effort to have a more, or to establish a more mature and purposeful understanding between us, even if the understanding is this is why what you're doing is unacceptable. So yeah, the evolution of the higher self, of the Holy Spirit, which God has prepared for us to embody, can be compared to someone going their whole life without ever knowing anything about nutrition. They've just been eating whatever they wanted, not knowing why certain things upset them and certain things made them feel good. And then one day, someone teaches them all sorts of things about nutrition and health. Well, up until that point, being uninformed, they didn't really have good options or bad options. Their only choice was to rely on their instincts. But after they've been informed about nutrition, suddenly they have access to a higher form of self-care. And most, if not all, of their old eating habits and instincts are suddenly a lower form of self-care. And they will now have to choose between what they may be used to and comfortable with and what they now know is actually better for their health. And that's how a lot of spiritual revelations and wisdom also function. Upon the epiphany of certain higher spiritual knowledge, many psychological habits which were neutral to us before, which may be comfortable to us, suddenly become beneath the standard which we should now be holding ourselves to by merit of having accessed higher knowledge and wisdom, whatever it may be. And it's in that context, the context of revelations of sacred knowledge, which hold the power to change the nature of the evolution of consciousness on the earth forever, that I offer to you my new book, The Path Unveiled. Many people understand that there is a spiritual revolution occurring all over the earth right now, one which is setting the foundation for a new world, though the effects aren't always clear and obvious. What God has guided me to understand and reveal in this book is almost certainly going to accelerate the awakening and ascension of many souls in due time, though I have no way to know exactly how long it's going to take before people really start to take note of it. So if you feel guided to study it, like I said in the beginning, I've posted the link in the description below, and I look forward to building a new world alongside you.